What does the word queer mean? What does it mean to be queer? Some people think it means to be homosexual, that homosexual and queer are interchangeable terms. But I thought that's what gay and lesbian was. And if the L and the G mean homosexual, why do we also need a Q? What is the difference? Whether you consider yourself an ally of the LGBTQ movement or not, I think you'll be surprised at what I tell you in this episode today as we dig into the facts. I'm Kelly Case, and this is the Unhindered Podcast. The LGBTQ acronym has evolved over time to include many different sexualities and things that people identify with. It really grew in popularity during the 1980s and 90s, and it began as just LGB, lesbian, gay, bisexual. But as of now, in 2024, the thing that was originally LGB has turned into LGBTQIA2S plus, or as I refer to it, the alphabet, because they had to put the plus, or otherwise we were going to get every letter and number in there. It was going to be very long to say. Let me start first by just dissecting each of those letters, and then we're going to really dive in and talk about the Q in particular in today's episode. So L is for lesbian. It means a woman who is romantically or sexually attracted to another woman. G is gay. It means a man who is romantically or sexually attracted to another man. Lesbians kind of wanted their own thing. It used to be that gay just meant homosexual, but then lesbians were like, gay means male homosexuality. We want a term that's for female sexuality. And then bisexual is somebody who is romantically and sexually attracted to both men and women. The T is for transgender. We hear a lot about that these days, but it was actually added to the acronym in the 1990s to include those who felt that they did not fit into any gender binary. So they didn't feel that they were necessarily male or female, and has evolved to include people who are female but feel they're actually male, or who are male and feel that they're actually female. So they feel that their gender identity does not align with their biological sex. And this became really popular and important after the assault and murder of Brandon Teena in 1993. Brandon Teena was the subject of that movie Boys Don't Cry that you might remember. Q is for queer, and in a nutshell, it is someone who does not identify with traditional categories of gender and sexuality, and it is the topic of this episode, so I'll get back to that in a moment. I is for intersex. Intersex is a person who is born with a combination of both male and female, either chromosomes, genitals, hormones, or gonads. So they're certain parts of them don't necessarily match their sex. Something went wrong in their development. A is for asexual, and this is used to describe people who say they do not experience sexual attraction at all. 2S is for two spirit, and these are people who believe that they have male and female spirits inside of them. And the plus means it's endless. It means we can't say all these letters. It's getting to be a mouthful. We'll just put plus. And so now there are, I think, hundreds of different sexual identities that they have come up with, and they're not going to make a letter for all of them. So today I really want to focus on the Q. Do you guys remember the show Queer Eye for the Straight Guy? It's a show where queer guys would help non-queer guys dress in a way that they considered more fashionable. And I just thought that it was gay guys dressing non-gay guys, and that gay and queer were interchangeable terms. I thought queer meant homosexual, queer meant gay. But like I asked earlier, if that's the case, why do we have LGBTQ? What is the Q for? How is it different? What is queer? You might be thinking, this episode is a waste of my time. I should stop listening. I don't need to study queerness. Why do I need to understand what queerness is? But you might be really surprised to understand the deep roots of this thing, the agenda that it promotes, and the ways in which it is actually tainting everything in the life around you. You might not think it touches your life. You might think it's fringe, but I beg to differ, and I'm going to prove that to you today. While sexual deviation, confusion, and sin have existed since Bible times, these well constructed theories and agendas are a little more recent. In the 1920s, there was a group of people that formed at the Frankfurt School, and they are known as Frankists. And they got together and they tried to develop a theory of society that was based on Marxist and Hegelian philosophy. And what they ended up coming up with is called critical theory or critical theories. If you haven't watched episode 4 of the Unhindered podcast, it would be a great one to go back and watch first. So I'll put it here. Episode 4 and episode 10 are good prerequisites for this episode so that you can fully understand what I'm talking about today because it all goes together. So, critical theory, as a recap, is basically Marxism, which is similar to socialism, if you understand what those things are. So, critical theory says that there are two groups of people in the world there are oppressors and the oppressed, and that everybody fits into one category. In critical theory, that was like the capitalists and the workers. And the goal of critical theory is to destroy and rebuild or destroy and transform every political and social institution that they believe was created as a way for people to keep power. You'll remember from episode 4 that heterosexuality was shown by critical theorists to be a form of oppression. So they believe that heterosexuals are oppressing homosexuals. So everybody's in one class, the oppressed or the oppressor. The oppressor in this situation is the heterosexuals, the oppressed are the homosexuals. And they believe that that binary, putting people into categories of either straight or gay, is used for power. And so they believe that it has to be destroyed. This is all related to critical theory and ultimately related to Gnostic beliefs, which I covered in episode 10, about breaking free from societal norms. Queer theory is a critical theory which says that heterosexuality is not the norm and that gender and sexuality are just social constructs. James Lindsay calls queer theory a sex based cult, and I have to agree. So, the first thing to understand about queer, about being queer, is that it's much more than being sexually attracted to someone of the same sex. It is much more than being homosexual. It's actually about destroying societal norms around sexuality. And it's about seeking sexual enlightenment and fulfillment outside of God's design. It's Gnosticism. Anna Marie Yagose, a professor who teaches queer theory, says that queer is an identity without an essence, that it's always ambiguous. It's meant to be ambiguous. And if you were to major in gender studies at a university, part of your recommended reading list would probably include a book by Jose Esteban Munoz called Cruising Utopia. And in his book, he says that his ideas were the results of the influence of many critical thinkers, critical theorists, and Marxists. I'd like to read you a quote from his book. Queerness is not yet here. Queerness is an ideality. Put another way, we are not yet queer. We may never touch queerness, but we can feel it as the warm illumination of a horizon imbued with potentiality. We've never been queerer, yet queerness exists for us as an ideality that can be distilled from the past and used to imagine a future. The future is queerness's domain. Queerness is a structuring and educated mode of desiring that allows us to see and feel beyond the quagmire of the present. The here and now is a prison house. So, if you watched last week's episode, you know that this is the same message that the serpent gave to Eve. You can get there. You can become like God through knowledge of good and evil. God is just trying to keep you imprisoned. He's lying to you. You do not have to be confined and trapped by these sexual norms. You don't have to only be with someone of the opposite sex. You don't have to be male. You don't have to be female. The gnosis is a knowing what it means to live queerly, discovering your true gender identity, and freeing or liberating yourself by becoming your true self, unbound by biology, unbound by societal norms. So if you are queer, it means you've attained enlightenment. You can't be queer without attaining enlightenment. You've broken free from the prison of normal, the prison that was created by God, they say. Their worldview is that there's a group of normal people, me, us, that have power to define what's normal, and that we use our own inherent characteristics, our heterosexuality, for example, to imprison or oppress the abnormal or the queer. The main basis of queer theory is questioning the perception that cisgender, as they call it, and heterosexual lifestyles and identities are the only ways of being and living. And they want to challenge the idea that living with heterosexual desires is the only way of living that should be considered normal and acceptable. They want to break free from those norms. Queerness, in this sense, can be compared to the idea of being woke, to Gnosticism, as again I covered in episode 10. There's a common thread through all of this, which is that whatever is considered quote unquote normal or the status quo needs to be challenged because it is inherently oppressive or evil. And this is the very essence of Gnosticism, that the physical material world that we live in is oppressive. And the norms, the things that are considered normal, are just there to hold you back, to keep you imprisoned, to keep you blinded. And they say that we have to wake up and we have to be enlightened so that we can break free. And we see this everywhere today, that every gender or sexuality that is outside of normal is not only tolerated, but celebrated. And it isn't enough to just accept that someone is part of the LGBTQ community. You must also celebrate them for it and lift them up and see them as special because they finally broke free from the mold. They were brave and strong and they came out of the closet. So being their true self unashamedly. And we're supposed to celebrate that. According to the woke mob, they are the heroes of our world because they weren't afraid to break free from the matrix that we all apparently live in. And this becomes increasingly alarming as you think of it in light of my last episode. The idea of breaking free from the normal and rebelling against authority is directly against God. Think about it. The entire premise of queer theory, wokeness, and Gnosticism is that whoever created you wants to oppress you with normality and keep you ignorant of some kind of special knowledge that is out there. And considering that the LGBTQ lifestyle is also inherently contrary to scripture, you can see that this is quite the anti-God agenda that is being pushed everywhere. Its intention is to rebel against God and destroy his creation. I wonder if Satan created queerness. In general, being queer means to challenge anything that seems normal, particularly around sexuality. They see normal as something that was set up by God, the evil demiurge God, and therefore must be rebelled against. This means that the whole goal is to disrupt anything created or intended by the Creator, rebelling against everything that is in his plan. And one way of doing that is to destroy or blur binaries. Blurring binaries is the goal. There are many binaries that are being blurred and that they would like to blur further. One is obviously the male female binary or masculinity versus femininity. This is why there are so many people in the LGBTQIA2S plus community considering themselves non binary. They are trying to get rid of that binary. Non binary means they don't identify as being male or female. They feel like those are like two groups. They don't want to be pigeonholed into one of them. Other binaries that they're trying to blur is private versus public. Why can't what's done in private be done in public? In the pride parades, they parade down the street naked and doing sadomasochistic things. Why can't they do that? Why should things have to be only private or only public? We want to blur that binary. Who says they can't? They want to rebel against that. Another binary is artificial versus natural. It's becoming harder and harder to figure out if something is real or fake, blurring the boundaries between that. Plastic surgery is one example. How about the binary of health versus illness? Who says that being obese is bad? Don't let somebody tell you that being obese is bad. Live your big, fat, fabulous life and have body positivity and be proud of it. Can't I define my own version of health, what I think healthy is? Let's rebel. Let's embrace our obesity. Once you start looking around, there's a lot of binaries being blurred, not just in terms of sexuality. Queer theory at its root is about deconstructing what it means to be normal and really obliterating the concept of normal altogether. So they aren't content to just be gay and keep it to themselves. They want to be queer, to be woke, to break free, and to champion that cause. They want to spread it to others because they believe that it's good. And there's an agenda there. The program works by changing yourself and then forcing society to affirm and celebrate and participate in your transformation. Because when society affirms your ultimately Gnostic spiritual claim, the social spiritual realm to them has expanded. And now we have a new level of queer understanding. A new queer horizon has been reached. The prison of the here and now is being broken out of. It's a worldview. It's a spiritual worldview. It's a religion that is being pushed down everyone's throats. They are not just wanting to do what they do in secret. If someone is truly queer, that means that they have a worldview that believes that it only matters when other people affirm it and celebrate and participate in it, because that is progress. That means they are having an impact. They are making a difference in this world to break people out of the prison. It's a Gnostic religion. It's a religion that says that we are our own savior, not Jesus. We don't need Jesus. We just need to do everything for the greater good so we can all be one and we can all be saved. They know that you can't ever actually change the body, but that doesn't matter to them because the body doesn't matter. Remember, the body is just something that we're stuck in. It's just part of that creation that we are trying to move beyond and break free from. So it doesn't matter. The goal is to change society. And if people affirm your transition, then you have fully transitioned, even though you know that you didn't actually become a man or actually become a woman. It's all about getting other people to see you in that way, to see beyond your body. So for those of us who think that sex, male or female, belongs to nature, it has to do with biology, they think that that has to be obliterated because it's holding back their radical queer Gnostic world that they want to create. So biological science is downstream from the soul. It's just a prison that your soul is living in. And so if you're a biologist, then they say that you've bought into the matrix, like you are part of it. You are advocating for this prison that we're in, and you don't have gnosis. They think that biology is a social construct that we're stuck in. So in a queer world, they think you just need to awaken to the fact that you are a special historical agent and you can change what gets inscribed onto people in the future. You can make people less imprisoned in the future if you will just help break free from the biology that we're stuck in. Queer theory is a doctrine of a Gnostic cult rooted in sexuality. It is a rebellion against what God has created. It is a perversion of what God has created. Queer means to be against normal, legitimate, and dominant. It's basically pure rejection of healthy sexuality. It's perversion in its purest form. Queer is an ideal destination for them. Remember in that book, it said it is an ideality. It's a goal that they're trying to achieve. And that goal is total perversion. And boy, are we headed there, at least in America. We're living in a very perverted and pornographic world right now. So your unsaved, rebellious spirit is being imprisoned by God's reality, by his order, by his rules, by his truth. And the gnosis you need is to liberate yourself so that you can be the pervert that you want to be. And we can't talk about this without talking about drag queens. Judith Butler is a prominent person in this area of queer theory. And she wrote a book in 1990 called Gender Trouble. And it's basically a book about drag. And in it, she says, life is drag, drag is life. And she says that gender has been inscribed on our body. So this is kind of where we get that term, your sex assigned at birth. So she says that your body isn't actually the prison. The prison is the gender that was assigned to you, that was inscribed upon you, the masculinity or femininity that you feel like you have to live in because that's what society expects of you. And so to her, we are all impersonating a gender. So we are all doing drag. Like right now, to her, I'm not really a woman. I'm just pretending to be because that's what was inscribed upon me. That's what I was told that I was. It's a social construct. Drag is just another tool to initiate queerness, to help them reach their goal. It says that outside appearances are an illusion, and it sows confusion. And confusion is a really good way for them to blur binaries, to remove distinctions, which is what they want to do. When I say they, I'm talking about the queer community, but ultimately I'm really talking about Satan because it's his goal, right? He hates God's creation. So this is purposeful confusion. Basically, it says that your abnormal inside is being imprisoned by normalcy. They see life kind of like a play. We have some freedom in our acting and our style, but largely this play has been written, set, and scripted for us. They call it gender performativity. And we are really just acting like what we think we're supposed to be rather than being our true selves. So we're all just being fake. And gnosis, when you have gnosis, when you have special knowledge, it means that you've realized that you're in a play. You've realized that you are Truman in the Truman Show, so to speak. And drag is you going against the script, not playing the part that was scripted for you. And in particular, they want this for our children. The initiation, the way to initiate someone into queerness is through sexuality. Sexuality is their path to gnosis, the way that they awaken people to special knowledge. And there is a binary that they have, even though they don't like binaries, of innocence versus initiation. It's a big one. And they believe that sexual innocence is like used as power to keep people trapped from knowing, from having that special knowledge. Sexual innocence is trapping them in a demiurgic prison. And so putting queer into schools and having drag time story hour for children at libraries is purposeful. They want to strip the sexual innocence from children. They feel like parents and schools and these institutions are keeping children on script. And they want to show them, hey, you don't have to go on script. Look, you can be like me. And they want to confuse them so they don't even know how to follow the script. It's purposeful. It's intentional. Really, it's like a cult initiation. Do you know schools have books with very, very graphic homosexual explanations in them, like stories in them? That's purposeful. That's intentional. It's cult initiation. Get them while they're young. The LGBTQ progression, I talked in the beginning of what those letters mean. It started out just LGB, and people were fairly accepting of that. Oh, okay, well, like you can't help who you love. You can't help who you're attracted to. Like if you want to go do that in the privacy of your own home, it's not my business, right? That was where people were with it. Even before that, it started even before that. It started with fornication being accepted in our society. Fornication is sex before marriage. That became very normal, very acceptable. Um, and then we went to homosexuality, and then it's now gone to people were born in the wrong body and trying to get everybody to accept that. And it's just pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope with the goal of eventually achieving queerness, which I hope you now understand what that means. And queer people don't necessarily, even though they're all in LGBTQ, they don't necessarily align with gay people, because a truly queer person would say that a gay person is just saying, I know I'm in a prison, but I've learned to love my jail cell. Whereas queer is rejecting the jail entirely. So gay was really just a way to soften us up to queer. It was never the end goal. And everybody thought, okay, we have to accept this thing. Kind of like with COVID, like, okay, we have to accept COVID and then everything will just be better. If we all just accept it and wear a mask and stay 6 feet apart for a couple of years, everything will be fine. It's never just that. It's never just that. It keeps pushing and pushing and pushing the agenda. Homosexuality just got people to start pulling away from sexual norms, from societal norms. Fornication started it, then homosexuality. There's probably been steps in between. It's called the sexual revolution. It's this pulling away from God's design, from healthy sexuality, from societal norms. And the goal is down the road. The goal is a completely queer society, meaning a complete and totally perverted and confused society. So anybody who is an ally of these things is an ally for that. And I, for one, do not want to be that. I cannot watch this go down the tubes and say nothing. And that's why I'm speaking out today. And I'll probably get a lot of hate. And you know what? I don't care. I mean, I do. I wish I got no hate. I wish people heard this and said, oh my gosh, wow, you're right. And just loved it and didn't hate it. But that's not realistic. So, what is God's answer to all of this? I think something that is often missed in all of this is that we forget that, unlike what Gnosticism tells us, God is ultimately good. His ways are good. What he tells us, the boundaries he puts around sexuality are good. I can tell you because I now live within them. I have not always, but I now live within them, and it's so good. It's enjoyable. It's wonderful. I don't feel the need to break free from anything. If God is all knowing and good, then we can trust his design for our sexuality. We can trust his design for our lives. Let us not forget who he is and what he says in his word. God is merciful and gracious and slow to anger, and he abounds in steadfast love and faithfulness. And this means that we can trust him. We can trust him with our lives. We can trust him with our sexuality. We can trust him with our purpose. He did not make a mistake when he created you. You were created just the way he intended. He knit you together in your mother's womb, Psalm 139 tells us. So we don't have to break free of who God created us to be. We don't have to fight for freedom against God and his oppressive reign. He's not trying to oppress you. As soon as you stop fighting him and you just embrace and accept who he is, how much he loves you, what he wants for you, that's when you're going to find true freedom. That's when you're going to be fully satisfied. He's not trying to keep us ignorant. He's not trying to hide truth from us. Instead, he freely gives us truth, and he invites us in to true reality. The problem is that we don't often like the truth. That's why I'll get hate on this, because we don't like the truth. We want to create our own reality. We want to be our own God. It's easier to reject truth and uphold our own wants and desires. We do have fleshly desires, you know. And this new woke reality sounds pretty good to some people. But God calls us to trust him, to trust his word, to trust the truth that he has given us and live by his design and have self-control and live for the purpose for which he has created us. This doesn't mean that we don't love those who are struggling with any of the things that I've talked about today. We are called to love our neighbor. But as I've talked about many times, love means speaking truth. It does not mean telling people what they want to hear. It does not mean affirming choices that you know are not good for them. At its core, queer theory is a rejection of God's truth, and it is a rejection of the invitation to love and trust Him with all that we are. And that's not something we want to do. We don't want to reject Him. The remedy is faith in God. The remedy is a rejection of the temptation to become our own gods, define our own reality however we'd like. So, in closing, I just say, lean into God. Read His word. Seek His truth. Seek Him. That is how you are going to live an unhindered life. And encourage those around you to do the same. If you like this video, please click the like button. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Please leave me a comment and tell me what you think. Whether you agree or don't agree, I want to hear from you.